Imagine standing face to face with someone who wants to end your life. The distance between you is barely 3 steps. Your hand rests near the handle of your sword. The air feels thick, almost solid, as if the space itself holds its breath. Every muscle in your body knows what comes next, yet inside your chest there is no storm, no frantic scramble of thought. Your breathing stays smooth and quiet. Your vision sharpens. Time seems to stretch, each moment expanding into clarity. While your opponent's eyes flicker with tension and his shoulders betray the coiling of his intent, you remain still at the center, a stone in the current, watching everything unfold with perfect attention. This is not luck, not talent you were born with. This is the result of a lifetime spent training something invisible, something most people never touch, the mind itself. The samurai called this state Fudoshin, the immovable mind, and it was considered more valuable than any weapon. Before we step into this hidden discipline of the samurai mind, it would be an honor if you like this video and consider subscribing if you genuinely appreciate our content. If you could bring this kind of immovable calm into one modern challenge, where would you use it first? At work, in conflict, in training, or in moments of fear? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's enter the world that forged this kind of mind. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Mental Mastery, Bushido and the Warrior's Code. To understand how a human being could stand in that kind of tension with such inner stillness, the story has to begin long before any single duel or confrontation. It begins with a way of life. From roughly the 12th century onward, as warrior clans began to shape the political landscape of Japan, a distinct culture of the warrior emerged. Over time, especially by the long peace of the Tokugawa period from 1603 to 1868, that culture evolved into something more than military skill. It became a code that reached into thought, behavior, and even how one related to fear, desire, and duty. This code came to be known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. Bushido was never a single fixed document signed in one year and followed by everyone the same way. It grew out of centuries of practice, clan rules, house codes, and moral teaching influenced by Confucianism, Buddhism, and Shinto. Yet, when later thinkers and writers tried to describe the essence of this way, certain virtues kept returning to the center. Courage, loyalty, self-control, and honor are among the most often cited, and they form the spine of samurai mental discipline. Courage was not just willingness to risk the body, but willingness to do what conscience demanded, even when emotions protested. Loyalty reached beyond simple obedience. It meant aligning one's entire being with a duty or a person. Self-control meant governing impulses and urges so they served intention instead of ruling it. Honor was the inner and outer reputation of the self, the sense that one's behavior matched one's highest standard. These virtues did not exist as abstract decoration. For the samurai class, mental discipline was a form of survival in more than one sense. In the early centuries, during the rise of the warrior houses and the turbulent eras of internal conflict, hesitation or panic on the field could shorten a life very quickly. Over time, however, the role of the samurai changed. By the Edo period, the Tokugawa shogunate had imposed a relatively stable peace. Many warriors no longer faced frequent direct confrontation. They served as administrators, officials, and stewards. Their swords were still worn, but their daily challenges more often involved judgment, patience, and moral choice than open conflict. This shift created a paradox for a class raised on martial identity. They were trained for battle, yet most of their lives unfolded in a society where large-scale conflict was carefully restrained. Bushido became the mental framework that allowed this class to reconcile these realities. The true battleground moved from the outer field to the inner one. The question was less, can my hand strike at the right moment, and more, can my mind stay correct in everything I do? Confucian thought added emphasis on loyalty to superiors, filial piety, and social harmony. Buddhism, especially Zen and other schools present in Japan, contributed reflections on impermanence, detachment, and the nature of suffering. Shinto added reverence for lineage, purity, and the unseen threads connecting people, land, and spirit. Together, these influences wove a worldview where the warrior's greatest task was mastery of the self. Within this world, acting on impulse or surrendering to uncontrolled emotion was seen as a sign of an untrained mind. A warrior was expected to act according to principle even when feelings surged in the opposite direction. This did not mean the absence of emotion. Samurai poetry, letters, and chronicles are full of love, grief, joy, anxiety, and longing. What set the ideal apart was the expectation that these emotions be acknowledged, then guided by a clear sense of duty. The mind became a kind of inner council chamber where bushido served as the law that directed what would and would not be allowed to shape the final decision. Inner calm, therefore, was not a luxury or a pleasant side effect of training. It was the condition that made bushido workable in real life. Imagine needing to deliver unfavorable news to a superior, adjudicate a dispute between peasants, or decide whether to obey an order that clashed with personal feelings. In such moments, raw instinct and agitation could easily distort perception. The samurai ideal held that a truly formed warrior steadied the mind first, creating inner space between emotion and action. From that clarity, the person could perceive the situation more fully, weigh obligations, and proceed in a way that preserved integrity. Historical writings from the Edo period show that moral education for samurai youth emphasized reading and reciting works that planted these ideas early. Texts with Confucian roots stressed restraint and thoughtfulness. Clan codes laid out expectations for behavior in public and private life. Senior retainers modeled what it meant to carry oneself with composure, whether receiving praise or facing reprimand. The message repeated in different forms. The body may wear the armor and sword, but the mind is what determines whether the warrior truly follows the way. Within this culture, everyday routines became a kind of training ground for mental control. Rising early, arranging clothing properly, moving with deliberateness through the house, greeting superiors with correct etiquette, practicing calligraphy, studying classical texts. Each of these small habits reinforced self-governance. A person who could not sit still to read, or who let irritation dictate their tone, was considered unprepared for weightier decisions. Calm in small things laid the foundation for calm in great trials. This is why stories from the period often praise composure in trying moments more than sheer physical daring. A retainer who speaks gently yet firmly in a heated dispute, or a leader who receives a grave report without outward agitation, embodies the successful internalization of bushido. When that same person later steps into genuine danger, the mental pattern already exists. Pause, breathe, see clearly, then act. Inner calm becomes a habit rather than a performance. Over generations, this understanding of strength shaped how samurai viewed themselves. Muscular power and technical skill remained important, but they were always described as incomplete without mental stability. Writings and sayings from the time repeatedly imply that a turbulent mind wastes skill, while a steady mind multiplies even modest ability. The warrior's real advantage lies in the mind's ability to remain centered when circumstances swirl, to keep attention anchored without becoming rigid. This is the soil from which more refined concepts such as the immovable mind later grew. Bushido established that a warrior's worth was measured as much by inner stance as by external action. Once that principle took root, the next question naturally arose. How does one actually shape such a mind? How does a human being, full of urges, fears, hopes, and doubts, arrive at a state where calm is stable, even when the world presses hard from every side? The answer emerged gradually, through the meeting of warrior practice and spiritual discipline. Zen Buddhism, in particular, offered methods that moved beyond moral instruction and into direct training of attention and awareness. The samurai who sought more than noble ideas turned to teachers who could show them how to calm the mind in the body, in the breath, in the exact unfolding of each day. From this meeting, the path toward a mind like still water began to take clearer form. Chapter 2: The Mind Like Still Water, Zen Buddhism and Zazen Practice. The samurai class did not invent meditation, nor did they create the philosophies that taught how to calm the mind. Those tools came from outside, carried across the sea from the Asian mainland over centuries. Buddhism arrived in Japan during the 6th century, traveling from China and Korea, bringing with it a vast collection of teachings, practices, and schools of thought. Among these, Zen Buddhism, known in Japanese as Zen from the Chinese Chan, which itself traces back to the Sanskrit word for meditation, dhyana, would eventually become the spiritual discipline most closely associated with the warrior class. By the 12th century, as warrior clans rose to power and the samurai became a distinct social force, certain members of this class began seeking teachers who could offer more than martial technique or political strategy. They wanted methods to steady the mind under pressure, to sharpen awareness, and to face fear without losing composure. Zen monasteries, with their emphasis on direct experience rather than elaborate ritual or abstract doctrine, appealed to these practical concerns. The core practice of Zen was zazen, seated meditation, and it promised a way to train the mind through disciplined stillness. Zazen is deceptively simple in form. A practitioner sits upright, typically on a cushion with legs crossed, spine straight but not rigid, hands resting in the lap with one palm cradling the other, thumbs lightly touching. The eyes remain half open, gaze soft and directed downward, neither staring nor closed. The mouth stays gently shut, tongue resting against the roof of the mouth. Breathing flows naturally through the nose. From the outside, the posture looks quiet, almost passive. Inside, however, the practice requires constant, gentle effort. The basic instruction in zazen is to settle attention on the breath and allow thoughts to come and go without following them. This sounds straightforward until one actually tries it. Within moments, the mind usually drifts. Memories surface, plans form, worries arise, fantasies unfold. The instruction is not to fight these thoughts or feel shame for their appearance, but simply to notice them, label them if helpful, planning, remembering, worrying, and return attention to the breath. Again and again, the mind wanders. Again and again, the practitioner brings it back. Over time, this repetition builds a kind of mental muscle, the ability to notice distraction and return to focus without harsh self-judgment. For the samurai, zazen served a purpose beyond spiritual enlightenment in the traditional religious sense. They needed clarity before decisions, calm before confrontation, and the capacity to observe their own fear without being consumed by it. Zen teachers who worked with warriors often framed the practice in terms that connected to their lives. One teaching that circulated widely came from Bodhidharma, the legendary founder of Chan Buddhism in China, who reportedly said, "Use your mind like a wall." The image suggests a mind that does not react to every gust of wind or shift of weather, but remains stable, a surface that neither clings to nor pushes away what passes before it. This metaphor resonated deeply with the warrior experience. In confrontation, whether in a duel or a tense negotiation, the one who reacts impulsively often loses the advantage. The one who can remain internally still, observing without immediate reaction, gains time to perceive openings, intentions, and shifts in the other person's stance. Zazen became a way to rehearse that inner stability daily, so that when real pressure arrived, the mind had already practiced the motion of returning to center. During the Tokugawa period, when large-scale warfare became rare and samurai life settled into more administrative and ceremonial routines, many warriors made zazen part of their morning discipline. Rising before dawn, they would sit for a period of meditation before beginning the day's duties. This practice was not about escaping the world or seeking mystical visions. It was about clearing the mind, grounding attention in the present moment, and entering the day with composure rather than scattered urgency. Breathing played a central role in this process. One method that became associated with samurai training is sometimes called the koku-ho breathing pattern, though variations existed across different schools and teachers. The basic rhythm involved inhaling slowly through the nose for a count of 4, holding the breath for another count of 4, then exhaling steadily for a count of 8. The longer exhale encouraged relaxation of the nervous system, signaling to the body that there was no immediate threat. This kind of controlled breathing could be practiced not only during formal zazen, but also in moments of sudden stress, creating a bridge between meditation and daily life. The distinction between what might be called transcendent meditation and combat meditation became important in samurai practice. In some Buddhist traditions, meditation aims towards states of deep absorption, dissolution of the sense of self, or insight into the nature of reality. These remain valid pursuits, but for warriors, the goal was often more immediate. They needed a mind that remained alert and responsive, ready to move in an instant, yet free from the jittery tension that distorts perception and slows reaction. Zen teachers working with samurai emphasized a state described as readiness without tension, alertness without anxiety. This balance is difficult to maintain. Tension feels like preparation, so relaxing can seem like lowering one's guard. Anxiety feels like vigilance, so letting it go can feel like carelessness. Zazen training taught warriors to distinguish between useful awareness and counterproductive agitation. Sitting still for extended periods, they learned to feel the difference in the body. True readiness came with a sense of groundedness, breath flowing smoothly, muscles neither slack nor clenched. Anxiety, by contrast, tightened the chest, shortened the breath, and scattered attention across a dozen imagined outcomes. Zen masters who trained warriors sometimes used direct, even harsh methods to test whether a student's calm was genuine or merely surface level. A sudden shout, an unexpected strike with a stick, or a piercing question could reveal whether the mind truly rested in stillness or only pretended. These tests were not meant to humiliate, but to show the student whether practice still needed work. The goal was a calm that could withstand shock, not one that required perfect conditions to survive. Stories from the period illustrate this quality. One account describes a samurai who practiced zazen daily for years under a Zen teacher. One morning, while sitting in meditation, the teacher quietly approached from behind and clapped loudly near the student's ear. The samurai's body did not flinch, his breath did not catch, his posture did not shift. Afterward, the teacher acknowledged that the student had integrated the practice deeply enough that even surprise could not disturb the inner stillness. This was the kind of mind that could face a drawn blade without losing composure. Another teaching emphasized the posture of readiness, which applied both to sitting meditation and to daily life. In zazen, the spine rises from the base, each vertebra stacking naturally, the head balanced lightly on top. This posture allows the breath to move freely and keeps the mind alert without strain. Outside of meditation, the same principle applied. A warrior walking through a room, standing in a courtyard, or waiting in silence maintained a similar internal alignment, rooted, open, ready to move in any direction without hesitation. The body reflected the mind, and the mind shaped the body. Over generations, zazen became so woven into samurai identity that it was difficult to imagine one without the other. The practice did not replace martial training or study of strategy. It complemented them, providing a foundation that made those skills more effective. A technique practiced with a scattered mind remains clumsy. The same technique performed from a state of quiet focus flows with precision. Decisions made in the grip of fear often backfire. Decisions made from a calm center, even if difficult, tend to align with long-term values. The integration of Zen and warrior life also carried into other areas. Tea ceremony, calligraphy, poetry, gardening, all became extensions of the same principle. Each activity offered a chance to practice full attention, to notice when the mind wandered, and to bring it back gently. Each reinforced the habit of being present rather than lost in thought. In this way, zazen was not confined to the meditation cushion. It became a lens through which the entire day could be approached. The historical record shows that this integration was neither instant nor universal. Not every samurai practiced zazen, and not every practitioner reached deep levels of skill. Yet the ideal remained influential, shaping expectations and providing a model for those who took their mental discipline seriously. Writings from the Edo period often praise warriors who combined technical mastery with inner calm, and such praise almost always references the influence of Zen. What zazen ultimately offered the samurai was a method to meet the mind directly. Bushido provided the ethical framework, the principles and values that guided choice. Zazen provided the daily discipline that made those principles livable. Sitting quietly each morning, watching thoughts rise and fall, learning to return attention to the breath, these small acts built the capacity to remain steady when stakes grew high. The still water of the mind, undisturbed by passing winds, reflected reality more clearly than a surface constantly rippled by reaction. From this foundation of daily practice, more refined mental states began to emerge. Warriors who trained consistently in zazen reported experiences of clarity, moments when action and awareness merged, or times when fear appeared yet did not control behavior. These experiences pointed towards specific qualities of mind that Zen teachers and martial traditions eventually named and described in detail. 4 of these states became central to samurai mental training, each offering a different facet of mastery. Understanding them opens the next layer of the hidden discipline that shaped the warrior's inner world. Chapter 3: The 4 immovable states: Fudoshin, Mushin, Zanshin, and Shoshin. As samurai deepened their practice of zazen and integrated Zen teaching into daily life, certain experiences began to repeat. Warriors noticed moments when the mind operated differently, times when fear appeared yet did not dictate action, when technique flowed without conscious planning, when awareness remained sharp even after intense effort ended, or when approaching a familiar task felt fresh rather than stale. These were not mystical visions or supernatural powers. They were observable states of mind that arose under specific conditions and could, with training, be cultivated intentionally. Over generations, teachers and practitioners gave these states names, described their characteristics, and developed methods to strengthen them. 4 of these states became especially central to samurai mental discipline: Fudoshin, Mushin, Zanshin, and Shoshin. Fudoshin, often translated as immovable mind, describes a mental condition where external circumstances do not disturb inner stability. The word combines fudo, meaning immovable or unshakable, and shin, meaning mind or heart. The image is of a mind anchored so firmly that no storm, threat, or sudden shift can knock it off balance. This does not mean rigidity or stubbornness. Fudoshin is not the refusal to acknowledge reality or the insistence on a single viewpoint. Rather, it is the capacity to remain centered and clear regardless of what unfolds around you. Zen Master Dogen, one of the founders of the Soto school of Zen in Japan during the 13th century, taught that true detachment does not mean indifference to life, but freedom from being controlled by circumstances. A person in Fudoshin perceives danger, feels the weight of a decision, or notices disappointment. Yet these perceptions do not drag the mind into chaos. The image sometimes used is standing in the eye of a hurricane. The winds rage all around, debris flies, rain lashes, yet at the center there is stillness. The person remains within that center, observing the storm without being swept into it. For the samurai, Fudoshin was essential during high-stakes moments. A duel, for example, could be decided in a fraction of a second. If the mind wavered, hesitated, or fixated on fear of failure, that instant of distraction could prove fatal. Fudoshin allowed a warrior to face the drawn blade, the charging opponent, or the critical choice with full awareness, but without the paralysis or recklessness that panic brings. The mind remained steady, perception sharp, response fluid. This quality also applied beyond physical confrontation. A samurai serving as an administrator might face a sudden crisis, an accusation, a betrayal, an unexpected loss. Fudoshin allowed the person to absorb the shock, assess the situation accurately, and respond according to duty rather than impulse. In this way, the immovable mind supported both martial skill and ethical conduct. It created the inner fortress from which right action could emerge even when emotions surged. Mushin, the second state, translates as no mind or mind of no mind. This might sound like emptiness or absence, but the term points toward a different phenomenon. Mushin describes a state where the conscious, planning, evaluating part of the mind steps back, allowing action to flow directly from training and intuition. In Mushin, there is no internal commentary, no second guessing, no gap between perception and response. The mind becomes like a mirror. Whatever appears is reflected instantly without distortion or delay. This state is closely related to what modern psychology calls flow, a condition where a person becomes so absorbed in an activity that self-consciousness disappears and performance reaches its highest level. For the samurai, mushin arose most often in the midst of combat or intense practice. A swordsman in mushin did not think, "Now I will parry, now I will counter." The body responded to the opponent's movements as if by itself, informed by thousands of hours of repetition. The conscious mind, which is slow and prone to overthinking, gave way to a deeper intelligence shaped by discipline. Achieving mushin required extensive preparation. The mind cannot simply decide to stop thinking and expect skill to emerge. Mushin arose when training had been so thorough that technique became second nature. Only then could the conscious mind relax its grip without everything falling apart. Meditation also played a role, teaching the practitioner how to observe thoughts without engaging them, creating the mental flexibility needed to shift into this open, responsive state when the moment demanded it. Bruce Lee, though not a samurai, captured the essence of mushin in his famous saying, "Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water." Water does not resist or plan. It flows into whatever shape the container offers, adapts instantly to obstacles, and moves with effortless power. Mushin is the mind in that condition, free from the rigidity of fixed ideas, responsive without hesitation, effective without strain. Zanshin, the third state, translates as remaining mind or lingering spirit. Where mushin describes the mind during action, zanshin describes the mind after action. It is the quality of sustained awareness that does not collapse the moment a task appears complete. In martial arts, competitions, and traditional practice, zanshin is often a criterion for judgment. A strike might be technically perfect, but if the practitioner immediately relaxes, drops focus, or turns away carelessly, zanshin is absent. True mastery includes maintaining composure and readiness even after the apparent conclusion of an event. The principle behind zanshin is simple but often overlooked. Many situations are not truly finished when they seem to be. An opponent who appears defeated might have one more move. A crisis that seems resolved might flare up again. A conversation that feels concluded might still hold unspoken tension. Zanshin trains the warrior to stay present, observing and ready until the situation has genuinely settled. This does not mean chronic tension or inability to rest. Zanshin is relaxed awareness, the mind poised without gripping, attentive without strain. Samurai applied zanshin in self-defense scenarios where letting down one's guard too quickly could invite danger. After striking or blocking, the warrior maintained attention on the opponent, on the surroundings, on any shift in the atmosphere. Only when the environment confirmed safety did the mind fully release focus. In daily life, zanshin meant following through on commitments, checking details after a project seemed done, and staying engaged in conversations until they truly ended. The habit of sustained attention became a mark of thoroughness and respect. Shoshin, the fourth state, translates as beginner's mind. This might seem contradictory in a tradition that values mastery and experience, but shoshin addresses a problem that often accompanies expertise, the assumption that one already knows. As skill grows, the mind tends to settle into patterns, to see situations through the lens of past encounters, to stop noticing details that once seemed important. Shoshin is the antidote. It is the quality of approaching even familiar tasks with openness, curiosity, and readiness to learn. The term is sometimes illustrated with the progression of rank in martial arts. A black belt in Japanese is called shodan, which literally means first level. The implication is that earning a black belt does not mark the end of learning, but the true beginning. Everything up to that point was preparation. Now the real training starts. This perspective keeps humility alive even as competence increases. Shoshin reminds the practitioner that every encounter, every repetition, every moment holds the potential for new insight if the mind remains receptive. For the samurai, Shoshin guarded against arrogance, a trait that Bushido considered dangerous. An arrogant warrior underestimates opponents, overlooks dangers, and closes off pathways to improvement. Shoshin kept the mind flexible, willing to question assumptions, ready to adapt when circumstances shifted. The saying, "A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open," captures the essence. A closed mind, no matter how skilled, becomes brittle and vulnerable. An open mind continues to grow, refine, and respond to reality as it is rather than as it was. These four states, Fudoshin, mushin, zanshin, and shoshin, were not separate disciplines. They overlapped and reinforced one another. Fudoshin provided stability, mushin allowed fluid response, zanshin sustained attention, shoshin kept the heart open. Together, they formed a complete picture of mental mastery, a way of being that served the warrior in confrontation, in service, in study, and in solitude. Cultivating these states required daily practice. Zazen built the foundation by training attention and calm. Martial drills reinforced mushin by embedding techniques so deeply that conscious thought could step aside. Reflection on one's actions developed zanshin by teaching the habit of completing tasks fully. Seeking guidance from teachers and welcoming correction nurtured shoshin by preventing the ego from hardening around achievement. Historical records and teachings from the Edo period show that these concepts were not abstract philosophy. They were practical tools, discussed in dojos, referenced in letters, and woven into the training of young samurai. A senior retainer might observe a junior warrior and say, "Your strike was strong, but you lacked zanshin. You turned away before the moment settled." Or a teacher might praise a student by saying, "You approached that kata with true shoshin, as if encountering it for the first time." These qualities became the language through which depth of training was measured. The four states also carried a deeper implication. They suggested that mastery was not a fixed destination, but a dynamic process. Fudoshin could be present in one moment and absent the next if the mind lost its anchor. Mushin required constant renewal through practice. Zanshin had to be chosen again and again, each time the mind wanted to relax prematurely. Shoshin demanded humility in the face of growing skill. Mastery, in this view, was the ability to return to these states reliably, to recognize when they slipped away and to restore them without self-condemnation. This understanding shaped how samurai approached not only combat but all of life. The mind trained in Fudoshin, mushin, zanshin, and shoshin became a mind capable of meeting any challenge with clarity and composure. Whether the challenge was a duel at dawn, a political negotiation, a personal loss, or the slow discipline of daily duty, the same principles applied. The warrior's true strength lay in the capacity to stay present, responsive, grounded, and open regardless of circumstances. Yet knowing these principles and living them are different things. The samurai who embodied these states most fully were those who not only understood the concepts, but tested them repeatedly in real conditions. One figure stands out in this regard, a swordsman whose life and teachings became a model for how mental discipline could be forged through relentless practice and deep reflection. His name was Miyamoto Musashi, and his approach to mastering the mind offers a vivid example of how theory meets reality in the heat of genuine challenge. Chapter 4: Forging the Mind Through Fire. Musashi's 5 Rings Method. Miyamoto Musashi was born in 1584 during a period of intense conflict and transformation in Japan. By the time he reached old age, he had fought in over 60 duels and numerous battles, and he had never been defeated. This record alone would make him a remarkable figure in samurai history, but Musashi's legacy extends far beyond his skill with the sword. In 1645, near the end of his life, he withdrew to a cave called Regando in the mountains of Kyushu and wrote a short text that would become one of the most studied works on strategy, discipline, and the warrior mind. He called it Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings. The Book of 5 Rings divides its teaching into 5 sections, each named after a natural element: ground, water, fire, wind, and void. Each section addresses different aspects of strategy and mindset. Musashi wrote not as a scholar or philosopher removed from action, but as someone who had tested every principle he described in situations where mistakes meant death. His language is direct, practical, and unadorned. He had little patience for theory that could not survive contact with reality. What he offered instead was a method for forging the mind through discipline, repetition, and the intelligent use of struggle. Musashi's approach to balance is one of the first things that stands out in his teaching. He famously wielded 2 swords, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi, at the same time. This was unusual in his era, when most swordsmen specialized in one weapon. Musashi argued that relying too heavily on any single tool, technique, or even mental state created vulnerability. Balance meant developing multiple capacities and being able to shift between them fluidly. On a deeper level, this philosophy extended to the mind. Musashi cultivated both fierce intensity and profound calm, both relentless effort and quiet observation. He did not see these as opposites, but as complementary forces that, when held together, created a more complete and resilient warrior. One of the most powerful sections of the Book of 5 Rings is the Fire Scroll, which deals with combat and conflict. Musashi used fire as a metaphor for struggle, intensity, and the emotions that arise under pressure. Rather than teaching his students to suppress or avoid these feelings, he taught them to transform struggle into fuel. Anger, frustration, fear, jealousy, these emotions carry energy. In most people, that energy scatters or turns inward, leading to paralysis or reckless action. Musashi's method was to redirect that energy toward disciplined effort. This principle can be seen in a shift of internal language. When a person feels inadequate and thinks, "I am pathetic," that statement ends in defeat. The energy of the emotion has nowhere productive to go. Musashi would suggest a different framing. "I refuse to remain pathetic." The emotion is acknowledged, even intensified, but the target changes. Instead of collapsing into self-hatred, the person channels the feeling into action, into the decision to train harder, to study more carefully, to rise earlier. The fire of emotion becomes the forge that shapes the self rather than the blaze that consumes it. Musashi's own discipline never collapsed because he understood this principle deeply. He did not wait for motivation to arrive. he did not depend on feeling inspired or confident. He built rituals and routines that held him even when doubt, exhaustion, or despair appeared. This is one of the central lessons of his teaching. Discipline must become identity, woven so tightly into daily life that it operates independently of mood or circumstance. Repetition was Musashi's chosen method for embedding discipline. In martial training, this repetition took the form of kata, sequences of movements practiced thousands of times until they became automatic. The conscious mind, which is slow and easily distracted, cannot manage complex technique in the speed and chaos of real confrontation. Only when movement has been repeated so often that it lives in muscle memory can the mind step back and allow mushin to arise. Musashi spent hours each day practicing strikes, footwork, timing, and spacing. The repetition was not mindless. Each iteration offered a chance to refine, to notice a small imbalance, to adjust breathing or tension. Over time, the accumulation of these tiny improvements produced mastery. The same principle applied to mental discipline. Musashi developed rituals that structured his day and anchored his attention. Rising at a specific time, practicing zazen, reviewing strategy, engaging in deliberate training sessions, reflecting on the day's experiences. These acts formed a rhythm that held him when external circumstances shifted. The ritual itself became a source of strength. When stress rose, when doubt crept in, the ritual was already in place, a pathway the mind could follow without needing to invent a new response each time. Musashi also placed great value on silence. In a world increasingly filled with distraction, he recognized that the ability to sit in silence without filling the space was a rare and powerful skill. Silence allowed the mind to settle, to notice what usually remained hidden beneath the noise of constant activity. Musashi used silence as a forge for sharpening discipline. He would sit alone for extended periods, not seeking entertainment or comfort, simply being present with whatever arose internally. Modern people often struggle to endure even 5 minutes of true silence without reaching for a device, a conversation, or some form of stimulation. Musashi understood that the restlessness provoked by silence was precisely what needed to be faced. When the mind fights back with a flood of restless thoughts, the instruction is simple: stay. This practice of staying, of not fleeing discomfort, trained a deeper resilience. In confrontation, the mind that has learned to endure silence and stillness is far less likely to panic when circumstances grow difficult. The habit of staying with difficulty rather than avoiding it builds a kind of inner toughness that cannot be faked or imitated. Musashi also taught what might be called a return protocol, a principle that addresses the inevitable reality of failure. Everyone who trains seriously will fail at some point. A technique will collapse under pressure, a decision will backfire, discipline will lapse. The common response is guilt, self-criticism, and delay. The person who misses a day of training often waits until the next week to begin again, as if starting fresh on Monday makes the failure less real. Musashi rejected this approach entirely. His teaching was clear: the moment you fail, return immediately. Not tomorrow, not after you feel better, not after you have punished yourself enough. Immediately. The act of returning erases failure and restores strength. This does not mean ignoring mistakes or pretending they did not happen. It means refusing to let the mistake become an excuse for prolonged collapse. Musashi understood that the mind is shaped more by what happens after failure than by the failure itself. A person who stumbles and immediately stands back up learns resilience. A person who stumbles and sits in the dirt, berating themselves, learns helplessness. The return is the training. Musashi's life embodied these principles in ways that went beyond technique. He was a ronin, a masterless samurai, which meant he had no lord to provide structure, resources, or direction. Everything he became, he built through his own effort. This forced him to develop a level of self-reliance and inner discipline that those serving under a lord might never fully cultivate. He wandered across Japan, challenging skilled opponents, studying under various teachers, and refining his understanding of strategy and mind. He lived simply, often in poverty, with little attachment to comfort or status. His focus remained on mastery, on the relentless pursuit of understanding and skill. In 1643, at the age of 60, Musashi withdrew to Rigando Cave to write the Book of Five Rings. He was approaching death and wanted to leave behind a clear record of what he had learned. The work he produced is concise, direct, and free from unnecessary flourish. It reflects a mind that has burned away everything inessential, leaving only what works. One of his most famous sayings captures this spirit: "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." This is not self-deprecation, but a call to humility and perspective. The person who takes themselves too seriously becomes rigid, defensive, and unable to learn. The person who looks deeply at the world with curiosity and respect remains open, flexible, and capable of growth. Musashi's Five Rings method offers a practical roadmap for anyone seeking to forge mental discipline. Turn struggle into fuel by redirecting emotional energy toward constructive action. Build rituals and routines that hold you when motivation fades. Practice repetition until skill becomes second nature and the conscious mind can step aside. Embrace silence and stillness as opportunities to strengthen resilience. Return immediately after failure without waiting for permission or the perfect moment. These principles are not abstract ideals. They are tested tools, proven over decades of real challenge. What Musashi ultimately demonstrated is that mental mastery is not a gift reserved for the naturally talented or the spiritually enlightened. It is a craft that can be learned, practiced, and refined by anyone willing to do the work. The fire of difficulty, rather than being something to avoid, becomes the very forge in which the mind is shaped. Emotions, failures, discomfort, all of these can be transformed into raw material for growth if approached with the right method. This understanding marked a shift from abstract philosophy to lived practice. The samurai who studied Musashi's work did not merely admire his skill from a distance. They took his principles into their own lives, testing them in training, in confrontation, and in the quiet discipline of daily existence. The mind forged through fire, as Musashi showed, is a mind capable of meeting any challenge without breaking, not because it is invulnerable, but because it has learned to transform pressure into strength. Yet even with all this training, with zazen and the four immovable states and Musashi's forging method, one question remained. How did the samurai sustain this discipline not just for days or weeks, but across entire lifetimes? How did mental mastery move from occasional achievement to consistent way of being? The answer lay in how they approached the most fundamental fact of existence, death itself, and the daily practices that kept them connected to what truly mattered. Chapter 5: Death, Discipline, and Daily Practice. Living the Way. There is a phrase from the Edo period that appears again and again in samurai writings, a statement so direct and unsettling that it stops the mind in its tracks. Live as though already dead. To modern ears, this might sound like despair or nihilism, an invitation to give up on life. The samurai meant something entirely different. They were not suggesting resignation or recklessness. They were pointing toward a practice that, when fully understood, created profound clarity and freedom. The contemplation of death was woven into samurai life from an early age. This was not morbid obsession, but practical recognition. The warrior class lived with the understanding that their role might require them to face mortal danger at any moment, whether in battle, in service to their lord, or in the strict code of honor that sometimes demanded they take their own lives rather than live in disgrace. Rather than avoiding this reality or living in constant fear of it, the samurai chose to meet it directly through daily reflection. The practice involved sitting quietly, often during morning zazen or in moments of solitude, and bringing to mind the reality of mortality, not as distant abstraction, but as present fact. I could die today. This breath might be among my last. The people I see this morning might be the last faces I encounter. This contemplation was influenced by both Zen Buddhism, which teaches the impermanence of all things, and elements of Stoic philosophy that filtered into Japanese thought over centuries. The purpose was not to create dread, but to strip away the illusions and distractions that cloud daily life. When a person genuinely accepts that death is certain and its timing uncertain, many things that previously seemed urgent lose their grip. The petty annoyance, the minor insult, the worry about status or reputation, all of these shrink in significance when held against the reality of limited time. What emerges in their place is clarity about what actually matters. Relationships, duty, integrity, the quality of attention brought to each moment, these rise to the surface. The samurai who practiced death awareness did not become gloomy or withdrawn. Many historical accounts describe them as more present, more engaged, and more capable of joy precisely because they were not wasting energy on trivial concerns. This practice also created a particular kind of courage. Fear of death is one of the deepest human instincts, and it shapes behavior in countless subtle ways. People avoid difficult conversations, delay necessary actions, cling to security, and hesitate at crucial moments, all because some part of the mind is trying to protect against the ultimate loss. The samurai who had already accepted death in contemplation found that fear lost much of its power, not because they were unafraid, but because they had already made peace with the worst outcome. What remained was freedom to act according to principle rather than self-protection. Alongside death awareness, the samurai cultivated a quality called heijoshin, often translated as calm, constant mind or everyday mind. Heijoshin describes the ability to remain steady regardless of external circumstances. Whether receiving praise or criticism, facing danger or ease, encountering success or failure, the mind maintains its center. This is not emotional flatness or indifference. Heijoshin allows for feeling, but does not permit those feelings to dictate behavior or distort perception. In practical terms, heijoshin showed itself in how a samurai carried themselves through the day. A retainer serving a lord might experience a sudden change of fortune, promotion, demotion, assignment to a difficult post, unexpected reward. The one who possessed heijoshin received each of these with the same composed manner, acknowledging the change, feeling whatever arose, then proceeding with the next right action. This steadiness created reliability, a quality highly valued in a social structure built on loyalty and trust. Heijoshin also appeared in confrontation. A warrior observing an opponent with calm, constant mind could notice small details, a shift in weight, a flicker of the eyes, a slight change in breathing, that revealed intention before it became action. The mind that remained steady could process these signals and respond with precision. The mind caught up in its own agitation missed them entirely. Strategic thinking in samurai tradition depended on this quality. Every move, every step, every pause had purpose, and that purpose could only be maintained if the mind remained clear. Daily discipline provided the structure within which heijoshin and all the other mental qualities could grow. The samurai did not rely on sporadic bursts of inspiration or wait for ideal conditions to train. They built routines that reinforced focus, patience, and mental toughness through repetition. Martial kata, practiced each day, served this purpose. The movements themselves were important, but the deeper training was in the mind's ability to stay present through repetition, to notice when attention drifted and to bring it back without harsh judgment. Beyond martial practice, many samurai engaged in what might seem like unrelated arts: calligraphy, tea ceremony, poetry, gardening. These were not hobbies or leisure activities, they were extensions of the same discipline, each offering a different avenue for training attention and cultivating inner qualities. Calligraphy, or shodo, required complete focus. Each brushstroke happened in a single moment, and once the brush touched paper, there was no erasing or correcting. The mind had to be fully present, the hand steady, the intention clear. A scattered mind produced scattered strokes. A calm mind produced beauty and precision. The tea ceremony carried similar lessons but added dimension. The ceremony moved slowly, with deliberate attention to each gesture. The arrangement of utensils, dust, the preparation of tea, the serving and receiving, the appreciation of the bowl's texture and the tea's warmth. Every element invited the participant to slow down, to notice details, to live fully in the present moment rather than rushing ahead to the next thing. This practice cultivated appreciation for simplicity and an understanding that meaning often resides in small, easily overlooked details. Poetry, particularly the short forms like haiku, trained the mind to observe nature and emotion with precision and to express those observations with economy. The discipline of condensing a moment or feeling into 17 syllables required clarity of thought and careful choice of words. It also encouraged connection with the natural world and the changing seasons, reminding the practitioner of impermanence and the beauty that exists within transience. All of these practices circled back to the same core lessons. Beauty emerges from simplicity, nothing lasts forever, and true strength comes from within rather than from external circumstances. The samurai who engaged in these arts found that the mental habits developed in one area transferred to others. The patience learned in calligraphy supported composure in negotiation. The presence cultivated in tea ceremony enhanced awareness in combat. The observation practiced in poetry sharpened strategic thinking. Emotional regulation stood at the center of this entire system. Anger, fear, and pride were recognized as the emotions most likely to cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. The samurai were not expected to be emotionless, but they were trained to observe their emotions without reacting immediately. This created a small but crucial space between feeling and action, a moment where choice became possible. In that space, the mind could ask, does this emotion serve my purpose? Does it align with my principles? Or is it leading me towards something I will regret? The practice of creating this space required consistent effort. Zazen built the foundational skill of watching thoughts and feelings arise without being swept away by them. Daily reflection, often done in the evening, allowed the samurai to review the day's actions and notice where emotions had controlled behavior and where discipline had held. This honest self-assessment, done without self-condemnation, gradually refined emotional regulation over time. Nature and solitude played important roles in sustaining mental clarity. Many samurai made regular retreats to mountains, forests, or quiet temples, removing themselves temporarily from social demands and the noise of daily obligations. In these settings, surrounded by trees, water, and sky, the mind could reset. The natural world offered a different rhythm, slower and more cyclical than human urgency. Walking alone through a forest or sitting beside a stream, the practitioner reconnected with a sense of scale that put personal concerns into perspective. Zen gardens, with their carefully arranged rocks, raked gravel, and minimal plantings, provided similar opportunities for contemplation. These gardens were designed to evoke natural landscapes in miniature and to invite the viewer into a state of quiet observation. Sitting before such a garden, the mind could settle, thoughts could slow, and a sense of peace could arise that was not dependent on circumstances being perfect. All of these practices, death awareness, shoshin, kata, calligraphy, tea ceremony, poetry, emotional regulation, nature retreats, were not separate from the warrior's life but integral to it. They formed a complete system for sustaining mental discipline across a lifetime. The system worked because it addressed the mind from multiple angles, reinforcing the same core qualities through different activities and experiences. The legacy of samurai mental training did not end with the warrior class. Elements of this approach continue to shape modern martial arts, military training programs, mindfulness practices, and leadership development around the world. The principles translate across cultures and eras because they address fundamental aspects of human psychology. Everyone faces pressure, fear, difficult decisions, and the challenge of maintaining composure when circumstances shift. The methods the samurai developed remain relevant because they work. In modern life, the application might look different, but the essence remains. A person facing workplace stress can practice shoshin, maintaining steady focus regardless of office politics. Someone preparing for a difficult conversation can draw on Fudoshin, anchoring the mind so that anxiety does not dictate behavior. An athlete or performer can cultivate mushin, allowing training to flow without interference from self-doubt. A lifelong learner can embrace shoshin, approaching familiar subjects with fresh curiosity. Anyone can sit in zazen, building the foundational skill of returning attention to the present moment. The samurai understood something that remains true today. A mind under control is a life under control. This does not mean rigid suppression of feeling or mechanical adherence to rules. It means developing the capacity to choose how you respond, to act from principle rather than impulse, and to remain steady when the ground beneath you shifts. These are not mystical abilities reserved for ancient warriors. They are skills that can be learned, practiced, and strengthened through consistent effort. The path begins simply. Choose one practice and commit to it. Sit in silence for 5 minutes each morning and watch your breath. Before reacting to frustration, pause and observe the emotion without immediately acting. Practice a skill with full attention, noticing when the mind wanders and gently bringing it back. Spend time in nature without devices or distractions. Reflect each evening on where you aligned with your values and where you drifted. Any of these, done consistently, begins to reshape the mind. The warrior standing on that bridge at dawn, calm in the midst of confrontation, did not arrive at that moment by accident. That steadiness was built through years of daily practice, through countless small choices to stay present rather than drift, to return after failure rather than collapse, to face difficulty rather than avoid it. The immovable mind is not a gift. It is a craft, honed slowly and patiently, tested in real conditions and sustained through discipline that never mistakes completion for arrival. The techniques are no longer hidden. They have been passed down, written in texts, preserved in traditions, and adapted to modern contexts. What remains is the same question every generation must answer. Will you do the work? The samurai knew that knowledge without practice is decoration. True mastery lives only in the person who takes the principle from the page into the body, into the breath, into the choices made each day when no one is watching. Which samurai mental technique will you practice first? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one, warrior.